Statements. The honourable member for Ottawa South.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And given the shortness of time, I just want to focus on a couple of key themes in this debate about our response and our plan to climate change and the Paris process and the Canadian response. The first thing I want to remind all colleagues is that this has nothing to do with ideology. It's not ideology. It's not voodoo. It's science. 2,200 Nobel Peace Prize winners, the IPCC scientists are telling us we have to hold global temperature increases to between 2 and 4 degrees Celsius. We have droughts, we have floods, we have sea levels rising. Ask the mayor of Miami. We have the insurance industry that blew the whistle 2 decades ago and told us there was a canary in the coal mine. Frequency of major storms is up, claim costs are way up, insurability is way down. Ask Lloyd's of London. Scientists are also telling us that if we see a 4 to 6 degree temperature increase by 2100, then 30 to 40% of all known species, and we don't know all the species yet, Mr. Speaker, of all known species will be threatened. So, as one of my kids might say, Houston, we have a problem. First, stabilize global emissions by 2050 and then reduce them. That's what we've decided to do as a planet. And it's clear why we're doing this, Mr. Speaker. It's the right thing to do. In fact, it's the only thing to do. I believe that our plan is about a new generation of politics. It cuts across genders. It throws out the old notion of a left-right spectrum. It cuts across all age groups, all socioeconomic clusters, all cultures, all Canadians. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because, need I remind all colleagues, there is only one atmosphere. One world, one people, one destiny. Apparently, Mr. Speaker, we are so insane on this side of the House that we want to get as much as we can from the $3 trillion environmental technologies market, which Goldman Sachs says is only getting bigger and getting bigger faster. I think we're all with Sir Nicholas Stern from the London School of Economics, who said, we can pay now, make the shift, and prosper, or we can pay later and pay an awful lot more, which is why he called on the planet to invest 1% of global GDP now to avoid potential loss of 20% of global GDP by 2050. This is about, Mr. Speaker, winning the race, and it's about leading the world. We are heading as a country and as a planet at breakneck speed into a carbon-constrained future. As one of the world's top environmental economists once said, we did not get out of the Stone Age because we ran out of stones. And we're not going to get out of the fossil fuel age because we're running out of fossil fuels. We're going to transition from the fossil fuel age to a new carbon-constrained world. Last week, Mr. Speaker, we spent the week debating national security. This debate, in my mind, is partly about national security, but it's largely about natural security. Natural security. And whether or not we're going to learn as a species to live within the carrying capacity of the planet. Scientists have told us there's a theoretical threshold we do not want to cross. They don't know where it is. That's why we continue to invest in science. That's why we have so many data collection points on climate all over the world, Mr. Speaker, to monitor and know the effects. But we don't want to play Russian roulette with the atmosphere, do we, Mr. Speaker? Nobody wants to play Russian roulette with the carrying capacity of the planet because we've all agreed to take a precautionary approach. We have to take a long, hard look at the planet's carrying capacity in order to sustain us, sustain our economies, sustain our consumption patterns, all the while assimilating our waste. And we should also be cognizant, Mr. Speaker, of this. There are 2 billion more people coming to join us on this planet in the next 30 years. We can't feed 900 million of them now. How, in the name of God, are we going to deal with this challenge? How are we going to move with our agricultural production processes? How are we going to deal with consumption trends? Mr. Speaker, I will be splitting my time with the member for Vancouver Quadra. I'm sure that member will be coming back to many of these themes. So I simply want to close before the question period, before the statements, Mr. Speaker, to say this. When we burn fossil fuels, we ask our atmosphere to assimilate greenhouse gases. Isn't it interesting, on a construction site, when you fill up construction containers with waste, you have to pay a tipping fee to drive those over and dump them into a landmass dump site. But when we burn fossil fuels, we pay very little, if anything, for the privilege of emitting greenhouse gases into the one solitary single atmosphere that we have. This is why pricing carbon pollution is all about crossing the Rubicon. Every single economist tells us this is the right thing. In fact, Mr. Speaker, soyons honnêtes. Stephen Harper, as Prime Minister of Canada, went to London, England, gave a global energy superpower speech and said by 2018, carbon would be priced at $150 a tonne in Canada, under his cap-and-trade system. So, Mr. Speaker, this is about internalizing a cost which heretofore remains outside of our economic measurement, outside of our economic accounting. It's time for us to internalize that cost because it will have a profound influence on efficiency. Mr. Speaker, this is a race about becoming the cleanest economy in the world. So we've got to choose. We're competing. And what does it mean to be the cleanest economy in the world? It means being the most efficient economy in the world. Most efficient with energy, most efficient with material and matter, most efficient with water. That's the race we're embroiled in, Mr. Speaker. And the jurisdiction that gets it best is the jurisdiction that's going to win, it's going to have the jobs, and it's going to create the wealth, and it's going to lead the way and the trajectory for the future. Thank you very much.
For Ottawa South.
Hear, hear. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to pick up where I left off before question period. I want to go back to the theme I was raising, Mr. Speaker, which is one of opportunity. For so many decades now, the debate around climate change has been steeped in terms that I describe as pain, grief, and cost. And it actually is very disappointing to hear today and this week so much narrative from the Conservative official opposition, which seems mired, stuck in this context of pain, grief, and cost. You know, Mr. Speaker, in every situation, we have moved historically as a species, as a planet, through all sorts of phases. I prefer to shift the discussion from the magnitude of the challenge, because it's a big challenge. What we're trying to do is a big challenge, to the magnitude of opportunity. Let's refocus the lens to look at opportunity. Now, in some of the remarks I made earlier, I talked about the magnitude of opportunity for environmental technologies. Goldman Sachs is tracking this on an hour-by-hour basis. The reality is there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and ultimately millions of jobs available to us if we want to retool our economy. This is the magnitude of the opportunity before us. And I guess I want to end by reminding my colleagues on all sides of the House that this is an issue that really does transcend partisanship. For example, I give Prime Minister Brian Mulroney 100% credit for understanding that the best, most efficient way to solve the acid rain challenge in North America was what, Mr. Speaker? It was to use a cap-and-trade mechanism with President Reagan to reduce NOx and SOx emissions across North America and thereby save millions of freshwater lakes. I support the view of Preston Manning, who's imploring and begging Conservatives from around the country to get with the program and understand the role and the purpose of market mechanisms. Mr. Speaker, my remarks come to an end. I think we can come to a consensus here amongst all parties It's time for us to move forward. It's time for us to show the leadership that we can.
Good job.
Questions and comments. Question commentaire. The honourable member for